Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So what we're going to be talking in today's video, I'm pretty sure majority of you are going to be finding this absolutely disgusting. Our health, our farmers' land is all being sold out in the name of profit. About a year ago, I've done a video where we talked about the human waste being spread on the farmers' fields. If you're not aware, some of you maybe are aware, but 87% of the UK and EU fields are sprayed with the human waste that the farmers buy from the water management companies, from the water companies, because it is actually much cheaper than the fertilizer. So it's technically a win-win. And when I talked about this video, guys, we just talked about the old system that is implemented to treat the slurry before it gets spread into the fields. But what's recently came out is some undercover investigations and the cover-ups to say that what's currently end up on our fields is actually far worse than what we made to believe, far worse what the farmers are made to believe. And the main point, it is all done for extra profits by the water companies. This is absolutely horrendous. So anyway, guys, I'm referring to an article, made by Guardian. They basically undertook the investigation alongside of also there was a whistleblower from the environmental agency. So the article came out in the beginning of this month. And they looked into the details of what's been happening, and what they found out is the fact that what is currently happening is done pretty much deliberately, or let's say knowingly, by the water companies. They put in all of us at risks knowingly just so they can make extra money. So the current regulations for testing sludge, the regulations been implemented in 1989. This is long time ago, right? Long time ago. So all the implementations they have to test this for 7 heavy metals. This is that, just 7 metals. We're talking about cadmium, chromium, copper, lead, mercury, nickel, and zinc. Other basic things like pH, dry solid contents. But what they're not testing is the PFAS, which are the forever chemicals, which are a lot of them. And again, don't get me started on this. Apparently, knowingly the company made this, but we cover this in a different video. Microplastics, hormone disruptors, pharmaceuticals, industrial solvents. So basically all of that is end up on our sludge. So if you can imagine that the diets of people in 1989 and pharmaceutical industry in 1989, in fact, it's totally different to what we are consuming now. People eat unhealthily, people eat ultra-processed food. There is tons and tons of hormonal tablets, vitamin substitutes, everything else that we put in our body end up being in the sewers, and in fact on the top of what we flush down the toilet, or some people flush down the toilet, it's all end up on our fields. Anyway, apparently in the 2024, there was a study that tested all the sewage slurry, and they found that all of the samples they have taken consisted more than EU allowed amounts of all of those chemicals. So that we're talking about every single one of the samples contained a huge levels of all of those things combined. Again, it was another study that was carried out into our fruits and vegetables in the supermarkets, and I found that 87% of all fruits and vegetables were contaminated. And we're talking about contamination sometimes beyond the ability to wash this off. So number one out of the almost contaminated ones was actually strawberries, with 91 to 95% of the samples contaminated. Then we had the grapes at 61%, cherries at 56%, spinach at 42%, and tomatoes at 38%. So if you can imagine all the foods that we consume, fruits and vegetables, we're consuming a lot of that stuff, not say unknowingly, but in a bigger or huger quantities than one would think. And in some instances, of course, yes, as I said, you can potentially wash this off, but in a lot of instances, you cannot. And again, some of you people might think that the organic is the way forward, and this would never happen in organic farming. But again, that could not be further from the truth. I strongly urge you to have a look at the video I have done a couple of months back, and it was titled, "Is the Organic a Lie?" And that will open your eyes a little bit to what you think, or to what you may believe organic is in terms of fruit and vegetables and organic farming. It is totally different ball game. So I please strongly suggest you to have a look. So another interesting thing, that apparently many of the sludge spreading sites are actually very near the rivers. And we're talking about 1 in 20 is within 100 meters. So you can imagine all of the chemicals, all of that stuff that gets washed into the river and it doesn't dissolve. It just stays in the water, it stays in the soil, and it just builds up over the time. I've done again a couple of videos when we talked about the water contamination, and you might have seen this in the news. Things like especially the firefighters' foam on a certain countries like France recently stopped people using the tap water because they found that all of those chemicals leached into the main water supply. So people have been consuming that water, unknowingly consuming all those chemicals. And it's here in UK. I think it was Northern Ireland. I think it was Isle of Wight, I want to say. Again, I've covered this, I've forgotten. But it is the same thing. They found that over the past 7 years or so, people have been consuming that. And people have found some raised levels of certain chemicals in their bodies, which are actually affecting people's health. It was done to the same extreme that they were looking at potentially funding, some are not research, but funding some sort of procedures to clean people's body from those chemicals. And this is how bad this is. I don't think many people understand, or even the water companies, whether they understand or they don't, what possible the damage they're causing to people and the environment, all in the name of profits. So the scary part is that the water companies knowingly accepted the commercial waste, industrial waste into the sewers because it makes them more money. Again, as I said, I thought it was just because they couldn't treat that, but no, this is knowingly accepting because it makes them extra money. So those companies will pay water companies and dump their waste into the sewers. As I said, the waste gets treated, or our human waste gets treated through the sewer company, and then it gets mixed in with this waste and then spread into the fields. So as we said, all of this is done in the name of profit. So let's have a look at some statistics for the water companies. So in 2024 to 2025, so UK water companies collectively, so all of the companies altogether, made over 2.5 billion in profit. 2.5 billion in profit. And they paid out more than 1 billion in dividends to stakeholders. This is a lot of money. This is a lot of money, a lot of profit. And at the same time, they still want to make more money, but putting our health, our farmland at risk for extra money. Just think about this for a second, okay? Right, so meanwhile, they're making such a huge profit. They lose, right, you ready for this? 2.4 billion of liters of water per day, okay? Per day. This is nearly 20% of our daily water. They lose this because of the old infrastructure and the water leaks. So now let's think about where we are right now. Oh, I believe a lot of the parts of the country now in drought, because guess what? We're running out of water. So they take in the untreated chemical waste to put this in our field to make extra money, and rather spend this money treating the leaks so we don't end up into drought. They just give the money to their stakeholders, and then they're telling you and me that we need to be very careful with the water. Make sure you turn your tap off when you brush your teeth. Make sure you do not wash your car with a hose. Make sure you do not water your garden with a hose because, well, there is not enough water. This is absolutely horrendous. That makes you really understand, okay, that those people really don't care about anything at all. And just another little example for you. My husband was driving to work the other day, and he said he noticed a Welsh water vans, because we live in Wales and our water is supplied by Welsh water, on the side of the road, and they had one of those pop-up little, like a firefighter's taps, and they were literally spraying water left and right at the horrendous quantities. He left to work early hours in the morning. He came back in a normal work time about 6 o'clock. They were still there wasting that water. I'm like, this is a bit strange. Maybe there was something went off. Maybe just something happening. I don't know. So the other day, I went the same direction. I went to do some shopping. And guess what? They were there at 9 o'clock draining water. Okay. And I've been out for a few hours again. I came back and they were still doing this. So if anybody can find or give me an explanation why on earth we are in a drought situation across the, majority part of the country, and the Welsh water draining literally thousands of litres a second probably, then I would like to know. So another very interesting thing, apparently the many sludge applications are covered under the waste exemption. So meaning that there is no permit required, there's no detailed environmental review, and minimal monitoring by regulators like Environmental Agency. So I understand, obviously, the water companies accept that sort of waste because, yes, of course, they make some tons of money, but apparently there is no legal requirement to treat the contaminants like PFAS, and regulators have no effective oversight, in some cases looking the other way. And this is where the whistleblower apparently suggested that they know it's happening, but they choose not to do anything about it. So this is pretty horrendous. So we're talking about the system, guys, that it is like many years old. So they know then that the system testing for just the 7 heavy metals. They also now know there is tons and tons of stuff is actually in the sludge. They make tests. All of that came up positive for too many chemicals in the sludge, and yet nobody chooses to do anything about it. So rather than waste all that money on these stakeholders on the dividends, invest into upgrade the system. Why is the environmental agency is looking the other way? They're there, even organic people. Why is this not being kicked up in the open? Why is it still allowed to happen? I understand, farmers apparently being lied to what's actually in there, because a lot of farmers have believed or have been told, in fact, that it's all been clean. But to be fair, if you kind of do research in the past, you kind of probably understand that, in fact, it is maybe not the case. And I understand that farmers are under the huge pressure of financial pressure. We know governments, they're trying to beat the farmers down because, well, we don't need farmers according to the government. So, and we know the agenda of the government. So, we don't need farmers, we need to import the food. We all know where this all heading. And I see where the farmers would choose to cut corners potentially to buy the human waste rather than buy proper fertilizer. But at the same time, they contaminate the soil. It's kind of double-edged sword, because yes, you save yourself money, but then the more of that stuff you put on your soil, it stays in the ground, and year on year, and sometimes they spray obviously more than once a year, instead of building up in the soil, means in time you just produce less fruit, potentially less vegetables, and in fact the more contaminated vegetables as well. But the most horrendous part to me, and I'm sure you probably find the same, is the fact that, once more time, that those companies, the water companies, make absolute billions, but they choose to contaminate the soil, to contaminate our food supply, just because they want to make extra money. So I think this is absolutely horrendous. And unfortunately, unless the government or other bodies get involved and try to resolve this issue, this is only going to get worse, because those PFAS, they do stay in the ground. As I said, they will just build up. So year on year, the produce will be more contaminated. And again, in some cases, you might be able to wash some of this off, but in a lot of cases, you're not, especially the vegetables that do grow in the ground. They just soak in whatever is there. And this is pretty sad. So it is, unfortunately, a pretty sad world we live in. On the top of everything else that is happening, I just cannot believe that deliberate part. This is what really bothers me. Or let's say the knowing part, just to brush this under the carpet. You know it's happening, they know it's happening, but they still choose to do that. So there we are. Anyway, guys, well, hopefully you find this video eye-opening, a little bit helpful, hopefully. Please don't forget, thumbs up. Share the video out. It does really help the channel grow. This is the whole idea. We're trying to spread the current ongoing things in the world, and of course try to prepare for what we can when we can. Otherwise, guys, well, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you soon. Bye bye.